Welcome to the CardinalConnect.com podcast network, your number one source for Louisville Cardinal athletics. Now, here is your host, Nick Coffey.
Hello and welcome to the CardinalConnect.com webcast here, which we're now calling Cardinal Connect TV. I am your host, Nick Coffey. Joining me here in studio, Brandon Zellers. If you have followed me, well, if you've listened throughout my radio career, which I had. I'm not on the radio anymore, as you probably know. But Brandon was with me at 1450, the Sports Buzz, for a lot of shows, for a lot of good times. And now here we are on the webcast, like I said, which we're now calling Cardinal Connect TV. I hope it sticks. I feel like it's a little more modern, a little bit more hip.
A little bit more like what we do, like on the internet type of thing.
Sure. And which we are. We're taking over the internet, right?
Yeah. And I'm glad to be here this week. Last week I couldn't be here because I was competing in Europe's Strongest Man competition.
No, he wasn't.
Yeah, I was. Against the Mountain from Game of Thrones and Mark Henry. I came in second.
He's totally full of it, which is why I brought him here, because he brings a little bit of flavor to the show, which, you know, he also brings some other stuff too. But JD Coffey couldn't be with us. Hopefully he'll be back next week. Also, joining us throughout all the shows we're going to be doing throughout the season, football, basketball, even in the offseason, we'll be doing some shows as well. Gabe DeVante is going to join us, Andy Knable. We're going to bring everybody in. Never Nervous Burris. He's at a Titans game right now, which it's raining really hard. I wish he probably wishes he was here right now with us, actually.
Well, I mean, hey, he's watching Bishop Sankey and the boys, so, you know.
Well, he's actually watching Teddy Bridgewater lead touchdown drives. But anyways, it's game week. It's finally here. And today's show we're going to talk tonight's show I should say, we're going to talk mostly about Miami and Louisville, which is the big game. We've been waiting for game week, it feels like all summer. Now it's finally here. Bobby Petrino back at the helm, taking over, going to coach another game at Papa John's Cardinal Stadium, which if you'd asked us 3 years ago if Bobby Petrino would ever be back coaching a game here, I think everybody would have thought, it's a dumb question. But here he is, and Louisville's heading into the ACC, something you never thought would really happen, but here it is, and it's a big game. The big news, obviously, this week surrounding this game is the fact that DeVante Parker is going to be out. Now, we sort of knew that after Friday. The press release was sent out, and you and I talked about it since it happened, that when they're sending a press release on a Friday night, you just assume that it's bad news. But with that said, the fact that they didn't rule him out initially and just say he's out for the year, that kind of gives you the hint that maybe they have some optimism. And it was in the end, he had a broken, I think it's metatarsal pinky toe. Not really familiar with the injury. From what I hear, it's very much related to a soccer injury. A lot of players in soccer get that injury. I've also heard hockey players get it somehow. But he's out 6 to 8 weeks, and that's, we could sit here and talk for 20 minutes about how sad that is and bad it is, and it is. I mean, it's terrible for a guy in his senior season, a guy, a Louisville native who is arguably one of the best receivers. With a healthy senior year, the statistics and the record books would show that he's the best receiver that ever played at Louisville. And now it's going to be cut short. But he's going to, at least you hope he will be back at some point this year.
Well, and he will. I think that's the most important thing to remember.
And even if he's not 100% healthy, of course, you never want to play a guy when he's hurt. You have to at least make opponents respect that he's on the field. And even if he's not, if he's a little rusty when he comes back, it's still important to get him back on the field because, the defenses have to respect that he's out there. But anyways, as Coach Petrino mentioned on Monday when he broke the news that DeVante Parker is out 6 to 8 weeks, you got to move on. And I think it's a deep unit that they've got experience at. But I'll say this, there's no, I think there's so much truth to the fact that you can lose a guy at your deepest position, and it's not quite as big of a blow, but you have to keep in mind you're losing one of the most dynamic playmakers in the country, and there's no replacing that. I mean, DeVante Parker over the last 3 years, how many times have we just I'm remembering back to games, Brandon, where I'm sitting on Twitter, in the press box, reading my timeline. I'm probably sending out some stuff as well. We're just poo-pooing on Sean Watson's offense and the play calling and just how vanilla and how predictable everything is. And then all of a sudden DeVante Parker makes a play and we score a touchdown. And that's kind of, I think a lot of people not necessarily took it for granted because I think a lot of people truly appreciate how good he is. But he can really get you out of a jam. And, one thing that my father told me earlier this week, and he's so right, is when you look back at all the highlights of Teddy Bridgewater's career at Louisville, when Teddy's making big plays, DeVante Parker's usually on the other end of it.
Yeah, no, and I think you just said it, and it might be, it's never a good thing when somebody gets hurt or anything like that, but it might be a bit of a blessing in disguise for this Louisville football team who, like you said, they're so used to DeVante Parker getting them out of that jam, being the one making the spectacular catch. So, now it's up to guys like Matt Milton and James Quick and all these other guys to step up and be playmakers, so then when DeVante comes back, everybody can mesh as one unit.
And I think that in the end, these guys are, we all know they're going to have to step up and be, a little bit more dynamic. And I think they look, I'll say this. As I mentioned, it's tough to literally replace what DeVante Parker gives you. There's not one guy on the team that can do it. It's a collective effort. And I honestly think that they have a group of guys in every area. When you look at the running backs, the tight ends, especially the wide receivers, they can kind of fill the hole. But I'll be honest with you, at not DeVante Parker's press conference, but Bobby Petrino's press conference on Monday, I could sense it coming from him that he's going to be calling plays a little bit differently now. We've seen it for 3 years where he's one of the most dynamic playmakers in the country. And then, we're sitting here all summer salivating at the thought of a guy like DeVante playing in an offense like Petrino's. And, I think Petrino, obviously he talked highly about a lot of guys since he's been here, but you could just tell. When he talks about DeVante Parker, he just, you may be able to say he has not had a receiver quite as dynamic in his time at Louisville. Harry Douglas, Mario Rudia, really big playmakers. But, as you mentioned to me before, Brandon is in love with the statistic that Mario Rudia produced during his time with Bobby, where he averaged 22 yards per catch,
22.5 per catch his freshman
per reception his freshman year, which that stat may be a little bit jaded depending on how many catches he had, but he was still involved in the offense.
46.
So 46 catches. All right, so that's an impressive stat. But to be honest, if I'm being honest, DeVante Parker's a lot better wide receiver than Mario Rudia, and the thought of him playing in Bobby's offense. It just kind of, it's sad that it's not going to be a full season, but he will be back, as we mentioned. And they have a lot of other wide receivers. Now, I've said this all summer, and I kind of sound like a red-faced Cardinal Kool-Aid drinking fool. But I honestly believe, and look, maybe I'm jaded. I think that Bobby has more weapons than he's ever had at Louisville.
Oh yeah,
I think that.
That's there's no doubt about that. The Louisville still lost their best receiver. Like you can't deny that happened. And to lose a force like DeVante Parker is going to be a bad thing. But like I said, Matt Milton, I feel like can do some of the same stuff. We just haven't seen it, so we don't believe in him. Well,
that's the thing. That's my thing. That's where you and I are a little bit different, Brandon. Is that you have this mindset of optimism, which I appreciate, because you always kind of bring me up when I'm not quite as optimistic. You are always the guy who's positive, and I'm trying to be positive too. But I've not seen it from Matt Milton on the field in a game situation, which is why I'm not quite as ready to say, look, it's fine, DeVante's out, we'll throw Matt Milton. And I know you didn't I know you didn't say it that way, but there are a lot of people that feel that with him out, that other guys are just going to have to step up. I will say this, the one guy who can be that type of playmaker, not quite as talented, has not proven it, but I think James Quick and Matt Milton together could be big playmakers that kind of fill the void. And if you have two guys, to be honest with you, last year, Louisville's had really good receivers for the last 3-4 years. It seems like even longer, really. But DeVante was the big play guy. And Damian Copeland is a guy that is going to be tough to replace. But I feel like you could kind of fill in Kai De La Cruz, who had a really good year. The numbers that Kai De La Cruz put up before he got injured, he was on pace to be the leading receiver in every category: touchdowns, yards, receptions. He was having a really good year.
He's a guy who's actually gotten a lot of playing time since he got to Louisville the first place. He's been playing a lot. We feel like he's been here for 6 years because Charlie's been playing him so long.
The name changed or the number changed that changed the game. That's true. That's the truth.
And you need to watch your tongue saying that James Quick isn't as talented as anybody else, because that whole Trinity faithful will come down upon you.
Well, it's tough though, because I'll be honest with you. I think James Quick is as talented as a lot of guys, but I honestly believe DeVante Parker could be the best receiver that ever played here. So it's tough to really throw him in that category, but maybe he could make big plays. I will say this, towards the end of the open practices, James Quick really started to come, into one of the top options for Will Gardner. And, I will say this, losing, the most common, we're going to move on to talking about the actual Miami matchup and other things as well, but I'll say this, the most, what you've heard more than anything on Twitter and on message boards and whatever you follow, whatever you get your fix from on the Louisville Cardinal outlets, the most common thing you've heard is that you've got depth at the wide receiver, which helps you more than anything, and I think that's true. The fact that, we're not losing DeVante Parker and we're throwing to, Edward Scissorhands. We've got talented receivers who've proven they're good. I think another thing that helps more than anything is that you've got, even if Michael Dyer doesn't play, which we're going to get to that soon, they've got a solid running game that will also help Will Gardner out. Will Gardner doesn't have the big. He can't just throw it up and and DeVante Parker go get it. But he's got a solid running game. He's got an experienced offensive line. If they have to run the ball, they can run the ball. And something you put in one of your columns earlier this summer that or early in the fall camp, I should say, which is true that most people don't realize. Bobby ran the ball more than Charlie and his staff did, and I think that now. I mean, last year we saw it. It was ugly. But they tried to integrate the Sonoris Perry, Dominique Brown, Michael Dyer running back core. They tried to mix that all together, and they just couldn't do it successfully. And I think when you look at how Bobby runs his offense, you're going to see – Garrick McGee talked to the media on Wednesday after practice, and he legitimately said – and I almost put this out there as a specific story because, there's a part of me that thinks maybe he just didn't say it the way he wanted to say it. But he legitimately said – you can expect every single running back from top. If Dyer's healthy, we're talking Dyer, Don Brown, Brandon Radcliffe,
LJ Scott,
Corbin Lamb, LJ Scott. You could expect to see every single one of them out there. And look, if you look at Bobby, what he did in his running backs in the first time around, that wouldn't be a big surprise. And I think the running game is going to be a bigger help to the loss of Parker than people realize.
No, that's true. And look, Colby Smith got turned into a productive NFL player.
Absolutely,
just messing around.
Now he's coaching those running backs.
Yeah, exactly. Just messing around with Bobby Petrino. I think that the most important thing to remember about this DeVante Parker injury is that it was 6 to 8 weeks as of a week ago. So if it is 6 weeks, that means he comes back before the Clemson game. If it's 7 weeks, it is the Clemson game. 8 weeks is the North Carolina State game. DeVante Parker should be back for the Florida State game.
If that happens, I tell you what, that'll be a huge deal. I do think he will be back. And if Bobby's words were, they tell me it's 6 to 8 weeks, and he said it like, I just want my player back. They just tell me it's 6. Like he's hold like because I'm sure he's probably asking as soon as he finds out. And even Bobby's own words, I'm paraphrasing here, but he said he thought he took it worse than DeVante did. And DeVante's just a really positive, upbeat guy. Doesn't show a lot of emotion. Other than when he's scoring touchdowns and standing over people like Muhammad Ali knocking somebody out.
Shouts out to Petey.
Yeah, shout out to Petey Cautilli for getting that picture, which still owns the internet. Yeah. But with that said, I think that he will be back sooner than 8 weeks. I really do. I think that the surgery. I'm not a medical profession, and if you're tuning into this edition of the show to get medical advice, you're in the wrong area. But I will say this: I do think that the 6 to 8 weeks. There's guys who've missed a long time for it. And I've heard, I've seen the pessimistic side of it, but there's also people who have had this injury and they've played. Now they probably have hurt themselves further in the long run, and that's why DeVante made the right decision to have surgery and get it prepared and go on to the NFL and all that. But I do think he'll be back sooner than later, and I think it's closer to 6 than 8 weeks, which we got to mention, Brandon. It's good that the injury happened now. Mm-hmm. Rather than happening in week 4 or 5.
Yeah, no, exactly. If the devil was going to pop up and say to you, hey, look, DeVante Parker's going to be out for 7 weeks, but you get to pick the 7 weeks.
Let's do it in April.
Yeah. Let's get one of the weeks out of the way before we play in fall camp, and then let's do the first 5 weeks of the season. I've been listening to some Miami radio here recently, man. Do you know they think like they're going to win now?
Oh, they think they're going to crush Louisville,
even though like they know that.
Have you seen Kane Shades Radio?
No, I haven't had the pleasure.
Well, I put some videos on the site yesterday. I hope everybody's had a chance to at least get some entertainment out of it. The Kane Shades Radio guys Kane Shades are a thing. It's like they have glasses that are called
like Kanye,
Kane Shades.
Like Kanye glasses?
They're orange. And they look like the gas station glasses, or like the promotional glasses they give kids on spring break, branded like Geico on the frames
to make them feel like they just left a rave or something.
Yeah. Well, anyways, these guys were extremely confident. But anyways, if I could, I'd add that video to the to the webcast here, but we'd probably get like blocked because of all the nasty. Like they curse bad.
Oh, really?
They curse bad.
They're worse than me?
They say things that I wouldn't want my wife to hear.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it was bad. But anyways, they are confident. Miami's confident, which leads me to switching gears to getting to the actual game that's at stake here. It's weird to me because I'll be honest with you, a season opener for both, basketball is usually a season opener against what I like to say at the radio when
Popcorn State.
State.
Yeah. That's one of my favorites.
But football, is either Kentucky or it's Popcorn State, Murray State, Eastern Kentucky, something like that.
Hey,
Ohio last year.
Colonel some respect.
But anyways, this year Louisville football is opening the season not against a rivalry, but against a team that's a conference opponent. This is the first conference game they've opened the season with that I know of in the last 10, 15 years. And it's not Miami. It's not the U, like you say. I'll agree with you on that.
It's all about this U.
But it's a respectable opponent, one of the better opponents on the schedule. And I'm not, preparing for a loss, but this Miami team. It's going to be one of the two things. Last year, that Louisville really just went out there and beat that ass, or Miami just laid down and kind of wasn't really into it because their season ended really badly. They were 5-1 and were 6-0 and in the top 10, and then they kind of fell off. But there's something to be said for losing your best player, and their best player just so happens to be probably the one or two best running backs available in the draft this year, and that's going to be a big component. I think Miami's a tough team. I think that they're a team that's going to give Louisville some problems. I still think Louisville's a better team, but my whole thing was I can't seem to – I'm having a tough time grasping – because there's two things to really be excited about here. You're excited because it's the season opener in the freaking ACC. Bobby Petrino's back in the oven, if you will, and that gets you excited. But also, you're playing a really good team, so you're not going out there just to drink beer and watch Louisville, beat the brakes off of Popcorn State. You're watching them play a team that could be a rivalry.
I would almost argue that it's a budding rivalry. I wouldn't call it full-fledged, I think
you put it in the Syracuse basketball kind of rivalry, where it's brewing, and now that they're in the same conference, it's going to keep going.
It's new and fresh, and people in our generation,
kind of like us.
Yeah. We exactly. we know all about the Miami rivalry. I was just looking at it. I think we've played Miami going back to 03, 02.
It's been all here and there, and
we've had a lot of memorable games against them. I remember we knocked them out of contention one time. They knocked us out of national title contention one time.
No, they beat us in, I want to say it was 04, maybe 05. It was Brian Brom's freshman year, Stephon LaFour's senior year, and that was a game that we'll never forget. Of course, the dropped interception that Louisville was up big in the first half, had a win in their hands and kind of let it slip down there in Coral Gables, and that still is a loss that stuck with you. And then, of course, Miami came back to town a couple years later. They decided they wanted to stomp on the Bird, which was a big mistake.
Yeah.
And, of course, they paid for it.
If you stomp on the Bird, we will send Jared Swapshire out to you. DeMarcus Cousins knows how that goes.
Oh, wow. Jared Swapshire threw me for a loop there, no, stomping on the Bird's always been a bad move, especially when Bobby's in town, because he'll be full throttle, not taking his foot off of the throat. But we're going to take a break. We're going to come back on the other side, talk more about the specific matchup with Miami. Of course, we are obviously going to get into some fun stuff too, like tailgating, which
the blackout before the blackout.
We're going to have fun with the tailgating, but it sounds like they're going to kind of like not let you have as much fun as you want to have, which is we'll talk about that and much more. Don't go away. We'll be back in about 5 seconds here on Cardinal Connect TV. Welcome back to our second segment here of Cardinal Connect TV as we're previewing the season opener for Louisville as they're set to take on the Miami Hurricanes. I am your host, Nick Coffey, joined here with my co-host, Brandon Zellers, as we spent the whole first half of the show basically talking about the DeVante Parker injury. Obviously, it's significant. It's worth talking about. But as Bobby Petrino said on Monday afternoon, it's time to move on, and he feels that he's got guys who can step up and not individually fill that void that you have with DeVante Parker out. But he's confident in his offense, and I agree. I think this offense can get the job done. They're not worth quite as many points as they were with a healthy DeVante Parker, but this is an offense that has a lot of skill position players that have proven they can win and they can score points. And one thing that I like to throw in the mix here, and it's worth talking about before we get back to Miami as a whole, it's worth talking about the factor of Bobby, because I think that's obviously being mentioned, but you lose, last year you had Teddy Bridgewater and a healthy DeVante Parker, and that's really, and of course you have to throw in other guys who are gone now, Sonoris Perry and Damian Copeland and whatnot.
That's pretty good defense too.
Yeah, but with offense, my question is the factor of Bobby being the offensive mastermind that he is, how much do we have that offsets? Because, I watch a lot. We're sitting here right now watching the big screen over here, and we're watching Texas A&M put an ass whooping on South Carolina.
Beat them down.
And it kind of makes you wonder, is it all about the system? And I'll put it this way. This is not. I don't mean to knock. Quit looking at the TV. I don't mean to knock on former players, but Hunter Cantwell was his best when he was playing under Bobby Petrino. There's no denying that. So you wonder, if Will Gardner, who I like to think is a pretty talented quarterback, how good could he be under Bobby Petrino? And I think we all think he could be really good, but how much do we have that offsets? Because with if Teddy was here, of course, we'd be talking about this team scoring 90 points a game. But he's not here, neither is DeVante Parker. But I think that and one thing, another component that I do believe is very valuable is that I think Garrick McGee is a really good, not only an offensive coordinator, but he's a really good guy to work with Bobby Petrino, and I think that is huge. If it wasn't going to be Garrick, it's probably going to be Jeff Brom, who's now coaching the Hilltoppers as the head coach. And I do think that I'm more confident in this offense, not just because Bobby's calling the plays and he is the offensive mastermind that he is, but he's got Garrick McGee, who's a really good, if you could say, wingman. Mm-hmm. Garrick's not calling the plays because that's what Bobby does. But with that said, I just think this offense is I do think that there's so much more for the system you play in and how it's called, because we all know last year if there would have been a more, look, as this is, I'm not going to make the whole show about crapping on Sean Watson, but I do think that had you had a more dynamic mix, this team could have scored 60 points every game last year.
No, I agree with you, and we do a lot of crapping on Sean Watson around these parts. But
sorry, Sean.
But that's how it goes with these offensive mastermind types, though, right? Like all the offensive mastermind always believes that his system is the best, that nobody can stop it, that he knows what he's doing. So I think that some of it may offset, but DeVante Parker is just such a freak. He's just one of those next level athletes.
He's a guy that's going to make plays that nobody else is going to make.
That fade route to Teddy Bridgewater that they threw about 15 times in the FIU game, that was an unstoppable play. Like very few plays in football are unstoppable plays.
In the Kentucky game, I mean, like any time that's a really good point, Brandon, because the biggest somebody's got to prove to me and show me that they can be a red zone threat, because there was a lot of playmakers in this offense last year. The only red zone option they had, and I do think it's somewhat to do with play calling, but the only red zone touchdown they could get, unless it was on the goal line, was a DeVante Parker go up and get it. And they didn't have that at times, and they don't have it now because he's out. I think Zero Christian's that guy the way Bobby uses his offense, but we're going to have to wait and see.
And once again, I believe in Matt Milton. He's 6'5", he's big, he looks the part.
He weighs less than me.
Yeah, but that means he can get up. That means he can sky.
I'm confident that Matt Milton can rise to the occasion, because, to be honest, without a DeVante Parker injury, he probably wasn't sniffing a whole lot of action, and now he's still not starting, but he will be in the mix. And they've kind of, I think it was very weird timing. They put out a on the official blog for U of L, they put out a release on how he's really thriving after DeVante Parker's injury. But anyways, we got to get to Miami. We've not talked enough. We're now 30 minutes into the show. We've not even really talked trash about Miami.
Is there a reason to?
Yeah, there is, because I'll be honest with you. I think that they are not the U of the 90s, and when they were at one point very elite.
They have no more soldiers like Kellen Winslow.
And they're not elite right now, but I have to admit they have some talented players. And I'm trying to, be optimistic and also be realistic. And I do think that anybody looking at last year's bowl game saying that's going to be a huge indicator of the score on Monday night, I just don't think that's correct. I literally believe both coaches when they say two different teams. I think Miami's got a little bit of vengeance. But Louisville, to be honest, a lot of those guys that put the hurting on Miami on December 28th last year, a lot of those guys aren't really around anymore. The defense really controlled that game, and the defense is replacing a lot of guys. But Miami, to me, they're starting a true freshman in Brad Kaya, who, by Felicia.
Yeah, Felicia Jr.
That's just I'm sure everybody knows that story by now, but it's still just like it's really random to take that guy serious. But Miami supposedly takes the guy serious, but it's worth noting that this guy, all I've heard since he's been named the starting quarterback is that his head coach is coming out saying he's not going to be in any way rattled by any type of road atmosphere. Al Golden was asked, how are you going to handle putting a true freshman on the road in that kind of environment? He says, not worried at all. That's an exact quote. He's not worried at all. But
what's he supposed to say? I don't know.
I agree with that. But what's funny to me though is that this guy, look what it took to get the job. It took the guy who was, I think his name is Smith, was in line to be the guy, to be the man, was legitimately actually a really good player. Tore his ACL in the spring, was out, and tried to rush back, couldn't make it. They had a redshirt freshman who they were very optimistic about. He gets caught smoking bud. He's out. He's suspended 1 game. Then Jake Heaps, the long-traveled veteran who played at BYU and Kansas, he was the guy in line. What's not being reported is he hurt. He got hurt.
Yeah, he's hurt. He hurt.
He hurt it.
No, he hurt.
He hurt. He hurt right now.
He hurt right now.
But I think it was his elbow or something, so he literally couldn't practice after a sore elbow. And now we've got the true freshman who just fought through the resilience, and now he's some. And look, I'm not going to say the kid's not bad, but I've had so many people try to tell me that, look, Miami, it's true freshman's the real deal. I mean, he chose Miami over Boise State. Now, I know that's not a huge deal, but I've got Will Gardner who chose Louisville over Alabama, which I like to think means a little bit more. But I will say this. They've got a really good running back in Duke Johnson, who I honestly think he's one. You look at the whole schedule all year, he's the best running back they're going to face. I believe that all season. And Stacey Coley's a big-time wide receiver. They've got some components there. I just literally think when it comes down to it, Louisville is just going to, well, put it this way, Miami's not going to be able to just produce more points than Louisville. I think it may be a shootout. We talked predictions earlier this week, and I think Miami's going to score a little bit more than I thought maybe 5 days ago. But I also think that Louisville, they're just going to be able to produce way more points. I shouldn't say way more points, but they're going to produce enough points to get to where they're not a comfortable win where they cruise, but they're going to win without a whole lot of trouble because I honestly think they're just going to they have that much more firepower on offense than Miami does.
When we get to the prediction section of the show, I mean, I think that Felicia.
We'll get there.
I know, but I think that Felicia Jr.'s got a really big mountain to climb, and I mean, he looks like a 14-year-old kid. He's a true freshman, 18 years old.
Do y'all want to know why I'm scared of me taking Brandon Zellers to games? Because I literally feel like we'll be in, they bring everybody out for interviews, and I'm assuming they would bring Brad Kaya out, and Brandon would literally refer to him in his face as Felicia Jr. because that's who you are.
You've never told me why you don't want to take me to stuff, and that's the real reason.
Because I'm being honest.
Yeah, no,
you would do that.
I would. Why not? That's who he is, right?
Well, we try to be a little bit.
I mean, maybe I wouldn't go that far and call him.
You may do
his face, but no, I think that it's going to be up to him to keep up with Bobby Petrino's offense and asking.
And that's a tough task,
especially of a true freshman.
Task.
So
yeah, I totally agree. And another thing we got to get to, we're going to get to our predictions, and obviously I've kind of told you what I think of Miami. I do think they're a good team. Now I've got people telling me one of our lead writers, Andy Knable, says he thinks that Miami is a team that could go 10-2. I don't see that. They have a tough schedule. I think they're a good team. And Andy's telling me that he thinks they're top 2 in the ACC and I just don't see that. I think that they've got pieces to be good. I do think Al Golden's a good coach, but I just think when it comes down to it, Bobby, I literally think Bobby's been thinking about this game since he got hired.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the first game back at Louisville, and then especially it's Miami, the team that he
stopped on his bird at one point.
Yeah, he personally has beef with Miami, so he wants to make this right. The sky is always falling with Andy. Like he thinks everybody's going to be second in the ACC, right?
That's true. But what's funny though about Bobby is that, and I'll say this, and I'm never going to make an entire show about the past because we don't want to do that. But there is a sense of confidence about this fan base when Bobby Petrino is on the sidelines that I've never seen before. I've never seen it.
Yeah, it's a little confusing to me.
I like it because people just know Bobby don't take no shit.
No,
you know what I'm saying? Excuse my language.
And I mean, plus we were sitting here talking about it earlier. I know you don't think it's that big of a deal. Bobby Petrino has not lost a game in the University of Louisville in Papa John's Cardinal Stadium.
11 years.
2003.
Of course, he hasn't coached here in a long time too. But yeah, I get it. No, I get it. He doesn't lose. But Miami, to counterpoint that and move on, the whole Miami, the fact that this is the season opener. During his first tenure, the fact that they came to Papa John's was the biggest home game he had. Mm-hmm. So now he's starting it off again.
Now he's leading it off
with a really good. And I do think here's the thing. This is a game when you have a season opener. I think it's a matter of preparation. I think it's more about what Louisville does than Miami does. And I trust when it comes to Bobby Petrino, the one thing I think you can trust is the fact he's going to have his team prepared to go. But anyways, we're going to get to our predictions as we close out the show. It's worth talking about, but maybe not for a broadcast. But I like to have fun, like everybody else. I like tailgating. I like to tailgate, and when you've got a game that is on a national holiday on a Monday night when everybody's off work at 8:00, I just imagine the tailgate. They might show up on Friday night and stay till Monday's kickoff.
Listen. I'm going to just say this right now for everybody. I'm going to look right in the camera when I say it. This is Louisville, baby. Like, we do the Derby. You ain't stopping us from drinking or partying.
Well, everybody's going to party on weekend because that's what they do on the holiday weekend. But the tailgating, and if you haven't heard, I'm sure you've heard by now, it's whenever you're watching this, but they're not going to open up the official tailgating lots, the official parking lots at the U of L Stadium until 2 p.m., and the game is at 8 p.m. kickoff, which I think is smart in a way because it will be a blackout before the blackout if they get people there at 7 a.m., But with that said, like, I don't ever want to be like, tell somebody you can't go party. Like, you can't go do your thing.
You actually think people are going to get there at 7? Hold on.
A.M.?
Yeah.
Oh, they would.
This ain't the Oaks, bro.
The whole lot would not, but I promise you will find at least 2 or 3 RVs in the green lot. People will be there, and beers will be popped by 7 a.m. if they were allowed. They're not going to be because they can't get in.
Well, I think beers are going to be popped by 7 a.m. anyway. Like,
sure.
If you're going to have somebody be the DD from the game, they can be the DD to the game, right?
Yeah, the only thing I ask, well, I'm not asking anything of you, but the only thing I would recommend is make sure that you are at least within your mind of watching football when you get in there, because it's going to be a big game. I mean, I want you all to remember the fact that
or be so out of your mind that all you want to do is scream, because they need it to be loud in there too.
Yeah, but then you might get arrested.
That's not my problem.
You might puke on a kid. You don't want that. You don't want that.
Again. None of these problems are Brandon problems.
If it's a problem for the Papa John's Cardinal Stadium, then it's our problem.
Oh, I gotcha.
But we got to get to our predictions. There's this show is particularly for the season opener, and I hope everybody enjoys it. We're going to be back next week with a lot of things that relate to not just the football game at hand, which I'm not really going to get real amped about a game against Murray State. I think it's who they play next week.
No, it was going to be the return of Jermaine Brooks, but not anymore.
But we'll talk about a lot of other things when we get back. But this show is basically just to talk about the season opener, which we are excited about. But I've got to tell you, I'm not as, obviously anybody that follows this team knows you're not quite as confident when you lose a guy in DeVante Parker. You're still confident in a win, but DeVante Parker's worth a couple touchdowns. Now you think maybe can some of those guys grab those touchdowns that he would grab? Maybe not. I predicted earlier in the week when we talked, I think I predicted 35 to 17. 35 to 21 was my prediction. After looking at what Miami has offensively, which I do, Brad Kai is a question mark. He still is. This guy's never had a collegiate touchdown. As I mentioned, he's a guy who fell into the job pretty much, and he didn't even arrive early. He arrived normally on campus like Reggie Bonifant.
Yeah.
And I think he's worth, he was a decently touted recruit, but I just don't think he's going to be able to produce as much points as Louisville's offense will. Louisville's defense may have some, regardless of anything, I think Louisville's defense will take a little bit of time to get their they've never played in a real game situation under that defense despite the returning guys, so it may take a little bit to get them. I think Miami's going to score some points is what I'm trying to say without the long-winded explanation there. But earlier on I thought with DeVante I was going to go 35 to 21. Now I'm going 28-38. Louisville wins. That's my prediction officially. Brandon Zellers, you're on the clock.
Yeah, well, I like how DeVante got hurt, but now you think we're going to score more points.
It's because I think it's going to be a shootout.
Gotcha. Well, see,
and the kicking game's going to be more involved too.
I don't think that it'll be a shootout. Like I said, Felicia Jr. is true freshman. Also, he came from...
You're forgetting about Duke Johnson.
But see, here's the thing you're forgetting. Felicia Jr. is from California. I think probably even L.A. I know he played at one of those big-time schools in L.A.
He did?
So not only did he just kind of get to Miami at the beginning of the summer, he flew across country. He's in a new place.
Been here for a while now, though. He's not jet-lagged.
But I'm not saying he's jet-lagged, but I'm just saying he's in a new place, Miami, new culture. Then he comes up to Louisville, place he's never been, never played in. I think that he doesn't have what it takes to get the offense going. I think that if Louisville...
How many people do, though?
But here's what I'm saying. I think if Louisville puts up, let's say they get a 2 or 3 touchdown lead on the Hurricanes, right? What, is he going to be the one to lead all these brave drives down the field? No.
That's true. So if Louisville stops the run, they win comfortably. But I have that much confidence in Duke Johnson as a guy who, as I mentioned, he might rush for 200 yards and Louisville still wins by a couple touchdowns. Yeah. He's that kind of player. As I mentioned, I think he is the best running back Louisville's going to face all season. But I do agree with Brandon and the fact that Brad Kaya, he's got some potential, but there's no reason to think he's going to come in 8 o'clock on Monday night, national TV, in a really, really tough environment and think he's just going to be Johnny Manziel. It's just not going to happen.
And I think if you need a score from me, I believe 35, probably 17, just kind of like what you thought.
35-17. I think Miami will score a little bit more, but we'll have to wait and see. But anyways, Here's my signing off comment to you guys. Get to the game on time. Get excited. Get rowdy. Don't get arrested while you're tailgating. Don't black out. It's going to be tough. I'm telling you. I know it's going to be tough for me.
No, and I mean, me too, but I might just walk there from where I live now. But listen, guys, our coach did not insult you. He did not say that you guys are not worthy or whatever. Come out, show love for Bobby Petrino, because that's all y'all been doing since he got hired.
Who thinks Bobby was insulting?
Nobody, but that's kind of how Charlie was. So I'm saying.
Sure. No, you're never going to hear Bobby give a damn about who's there for Card March, this and that. And by the way, Card March, I think, is slated for 5:45. It's going to be in the original spot, which you know who's happy about that is Greg Brom, who's been talking about it since Bobby left, that the dumbest thing ever was move Card March to they moved it to like 6 different places in the last 3 years.
It was on tour. It was like going on tour all around the thing. So
all right, we're wrapping up the show here now. Like I mentioned, we're going to be back recapping what we hope to be a Louisville win over Miami next week, and also looking forward to the next game on the schedule. Also, anything and everything else that is going on with U of L Athletics. Thank you once again for tuning in and checking us out here on Cardinal Connect TV.
Bye, Felicia.